Welcome to the Game of Life podcast, where we bring you inspiring softball stories, insightful tips from coaches and players, and explore how the game transcends its boundaries to become a metaphor for life. Whether you're a sports enthusiast, a casual fan, or someone just looking for inspiration, you're in for a treat. We'll unravel the tales that go beyond the scoreboard. Discover how perseverance and hard work on the field translates into resilience in your daily challenges. Learn about teamwork, leadership, and the unwavering spirit that fuels success, not just in sports, but in the game of life. We're back. It's been a bit, but summer times and vacations and busyness, it's just the way it goes. We have a guest coming on in our next episode, but for our viewers, well, you're just stuck with Alli and I right now. Hi, Alli.
Hey, yeah, stuck with us again. Hope you don't mind.
I want to touch a topic that I believe in, and I didn't quite follow it when I was in high school. And I'm not going to say I lose sleep regretting it every moment, but there's always what ifs, right? And it's the topic of being a multi-sport athlete in high school. And I think it's more prevalent because I've coached at both a very small high school with under 400 students. I coach at a high school with well over 1,000 students. It's more common in the small schools. It's common in bigger schools, but then the question becomes 2 or 3 sports. And I think it's more common to be a multi-sport athlete if you're really good than just picking one sport and specializing. That's what made me think of the topic. So we're gonna talk about all that. And I already admitted I'm for it, and I don't care what your story is. I just think it's good, and we'll get into the details later. But I want your thoughts on it before we continue.
Yeah, I mean, I love this topic. I'm excited to talk about it. I am a huge advocate of being a multi-sport athlete, and I think sometimes coaches and parents like to say they are, but then they don't really show it in their actions, if that makes sense. So, um, just thinking about coaches who, oh yeah, we love multi-sport athletes, but then time comes and they miss practice because they're in a state tournament for another, sport, and they're not super excited about that. So I think when it comes to being a multi-sport athlete, right, you have to stay open-minded because to me, there's so many different pros to it, right? One is you're just going to be overall more athletic the more sports you play, and we'll dive into all of these throughout the episode. Two, you're going to learn how to have different roles on the teams that you're on. You may not be the star in every sport that you play. You're not probably not going to ride the bench in every sport that you play, hopefully. You may be injured in one sport. You may have to, wear that hat for a little bit. Um, another pro is, you read a lot about being less injury prone. You're working different muscles in different sports. So I think that's a positive. Another one, you meet more people, you form more relationships, you have different teammates the more teams that you're on. Another one, you have different coaches that you have to learn to work with and, learn their coaching style and how to adapt to that as a player. You, I think there's different adversities that come with different sports that you have to work through. So, basketball is different than softball, different than golf. It exercises your mind and your body differently. And then the last one I think is it prevents burnout. So I think, if you're playing one sport all year round from the age of 12, I think it's really hard not to kind of get burnout with it. And I think other sports help you, playing multiple sports helps you find the love eventually for the one that's kind of going to be it for you if you're going to play at a high level. But I'll stop there and hear your thoughts.
Well, you only made a list of 7 things.
Right. There's probably more I'll come up with.
Well, I want to touch base on something you said real quick, and then I'm going to kind of hold us accountable, and we'll talk about each of these things. But the coaching aspect of it's interesting because
Mhm.
I feel like if you're the best in one sport, you can get away with playing another sport, meaning especially off season and not attending all the open gyms and summer
Right.
leagues or winter leagues. When you're mediocre, or I don't mean bottom as you're a bad athlete, you just might be the bottom on that team, right? It's all relevant to what team you're playing on. I think it's harder because you feel like you might be missing out or losing a competitive spot to somebody else. And I really
Yeah.
think that falls on the coach. I coach, and if they're missing, I'm going to start some summer workouts Okay. Wednesday mornings. If kids don't come, they don't come. I'll know why. Uh,
Yeah.
it's just to form relationships and make you better. It's not to hold a grudge against you when the season starts next year.
Well, yeah, and you know, what I find funny too is I'm gonna call it like asymmetry of expectations because there's some coaches who, when it's not their season, they still expect their kids to be at everything. But when it is their season, they shouldn't be anywhere else. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So
100%.
I think, you know, coaches just got to reflect on that too and kind of say, hey, like, is this fair what I'm requiring of this 14-year-old girl to do? I'm telling them that they can't be anywhere else in my season, but it's okay for them to miss other seasons when we're out of season to come to my practices. So I think that's always just interesting too. And I don't know, I think that's just something that needs to be talked about more, just kind of that, you know, whatever that expectation is.
Well, and that brings me to number 7. You talked about potential burnout. I'm a believer. Burnout doesn't mean you really don't like what you're doing anymore. I personally feel burnout is a result of FOMO, fear of missing out on something else. So
Mhm.
especially in high school, I don't care how big a recruit you are going to college. You might feel someday that you missed out because you didn't pursue other things, and it provides a lot of perspective too. And when
Yeah,
you have perspective and when you have experiences, I don't think you have burnout. If I'm playing 3 sports and I tone it down to 2 my senior year per se,
yeah,
I don't think that's burnout or quitting. You've done it.
no,
I personally played baseball, and then I mean, I stunk at golf till 10th grade. And when the switch clicked and I got real good at it, I stopped playing baseball in 11th and 12th grade.
mhm.
And now that I get older, I'm like, why did I do that? Like, it wasn't really affecting anything.
Yeah.
I don't think the extra practice I got in golf made me better than I could have been.
No, and I
Now I
agree with.
missed out on, I love the game of softball. I loved baseball. And you just feel that pressure when there shouldn't have been.
Yeah, I agree. And look how full circle it came for you right back to the game of softball. No,
Yeah.
I totally agree because I played basketball all through high school. So from 7th to 12th grade, pretty competitively to the point where I even thought about playing it in college and high school. But the thing I really loved about it is one, I just loved basketball. And two, when softball season came around, I was one of the most conditioned kids there, my basketball friends and I, because we were running miles a day in basketball for the past 5 months. So I think the one thing maybe I missed out on is like traditional street strength training, you know, weight room stuff. I wasn't necessarily hitting the weight room maybe like I should have been in high school, but functionally, I felt like I was one of the strongest kids there because, and you know, our basketball team in high school was pretty competitive and hardcore. So doing that for 6 months, when I showed up to the tryout and was doing the conditioning tests, when other girls were out of breath, it was, I don't want to say nothing for the rest of us because it was, and we pushed ourselves, but we felt in really, really great shape. But we didn't have to think about the prior 6 months as conditioning for softball. We just thought about it as playing basketball. So we we're almost accomplishing the same thing through a different route.
Quick dad brag. You were honorable mention all state in basketball.
Mhm.
So, and your team, the program's still super rich. It's one of the best programs
Yeah.
around. And so you said you didn't hit the weight room as much as you wanted to. How'd that affect you in college?
I mean, it didn't really. I think, you know, when I went into college, some girls on my team were further along in the weight room than I was, but when you do it every day, I don't want to say you catch up, but like you get to the point you need to be. I was lucky enough to have coaches in college who valued multi-sport athletes and they knew, hey, you know, she's athletic, she'll get there. I just think for me in high school, it was more important for me to learn all those lessons I talked about in those 7 things, right? Like how to have different roles on teams, how to deal with different coaches, prevent burnout, you know, find love for 2 sports. Like those things are more important to me than, you know, going and bench pressing in the gym. Now, that being said, I think I could have added a little more on top of that, right? I think I could have went a little differently about that, but I don't think it prevented me from achieving anything that I wanted to achieve in college.
If I was a college coach, which I don't plan on ever being, nor am I maybe good enough, I'm not going down that way. But if I'm looking at 2 potential recruits and one just plays softball, because this is a kind of primarily a softball podcast, and the
Mhm.
other plays three sports in high school, and the recruits are similar, but the one that plays three sports seems a little raw all day long. I feel like I would take the multi-sport athlete. Now, you might have to wait a little on your investment, right?
Yeah, and
I guess if you're a big enough program, maybe you don't need to wait because you're getting the best of the best. But I just don't see the downside of taking the multi-sport person because now in college you're just focusing on that sport all year long.
yeah, and I obviously think it's a case by case basis depending on a lot of different factors.
Right.
But from what you're saying, the thing I like about the multi-sport athlete is like I'm like, wow, they know how to compete. They're a competitor, right? Like they're competing every year in whatever sport they're in. I don't care if it's bowling, I don't care if it's badminton, whatever it is, they're choosing to compete almost every day of the school year if they're a three sport athlete, right? Where it's not, oh, I'm going to the gym by myself. No, like I'm pouring myself into whatever team I'm on for the fall, the winter, and the spring. So that's what I think is really impactful about that.
I think it would also be very impactful. I'm sure a lot of coaches do this. Talk to the other coaches of the sports that person plays to see how they act when it's not their main sport. I think that
Mm-hmm.
would tell a lot about their character. And I'm sure people do that research and vetting process. But
Yeah.
how I always feel if I have a star soccer player playing softball, okay, that's great. And maybe you're not the star, maybe you start. How are you acting? Are you in the dugout cheering? What are you doing? Or are you just saying, "Oh, can't wait till the season"? Those are the things that I think are really character telling, I guess.
Yeah.
So, why do you think you're less prone to injury? And again, this is not medical advice for anybody.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you're playing one sport, you're exercising the same muscles over and over and over again. Whereas when you're playing different sports, it's one, I feel like just less, I feel like it's more functionality, right? Like basketball season, I was practicing agility every day without solely isolating it, right? Like I was practicing multiple, functions of my body while playing a sport. I wasn't isolating each one of them in a weight room, right? I was running, I was getting mobility, I was enhancing my agility, my endurance all at the same time. And I think when you do something over and over and over again, right, it can put a lot of stress on different parts of your body. So, for example, like I just ran a half marathon about a month ago, and thank you. And I'd never really been a runner before a few months ago. It was just a goal I had, something I wanted to do. Any of you ex-college athletes out there would understand. And um, I stretched, I did all the mobility, but by the time I was done, like my knees hurt, right? Like different parts of my body, I had put a lot of stress on over and over. And I'll admit, I could have added some more functional training in there. Like I was pretty much just running for 4 months. And I could feel the toll that that put on my body, where so it might have been better if all right, I'm going to run, then I'm going to do yoga, then I'm going to go lift. I could have been a little bit more versatile in the way I trained. Looking back, I can see that now, but also, when you're a 14-year-old kid and you're only playing one sport, you may not have the perspective to see that either. And you're just going into the gym, on the field, on the track, and doing the same thing over and over and over again. I think that puts a lot of stress on different parts of your body.
Well, I agree. And before we get into maybe the pressure of playing a sport year round, when you were a college softball player, how much softball did you play in the summertime?
I mean, softball game wise, like
Well,
not much,
yeah, no, and
but
we'd go
no,
work out once in a while. Not once in a while, on a regular basis.
no, yeah, like I would go hit, but I would run, I would lift, I would do everything. It's not, okay, I'm just gonna go to the gym every single day and exert my body to its max. Like you have to be strategic and about how you're doing that, especially right when you're a freshman in college, you have to do this or you get to do this. I don't mean it that way, but you live for 5 years. So going balls to the wall, and I've seen this happen, like freshmen come in and they're just, oh my gosh, I'm going to exert my body every single day. And, I feel so good. And by the time I was a fifth year, I'm like, oh my God, like my
Stuff's
body hurts.
cracking, right?
Yeah. So my point is you have to be strategic about the way that you're utilizing your body.
Well, that's my point. So in your off season, you still focused on fundamentals, you worked out other body groups. I think the pressure in high school is I have to do this sport year round. I'm going to miss out if I don't. So now you multiply youth softball with 4 years of high school softball year round, and now 4 years of college softball. Now it's a decade plus of year round nonstop without a break. And I don't think those people make it most of the time.
Well, and that even gets more dangerous if you, at a young age, don't have a great coach, your fundamentals slip through the cracks, and now you're not just doing something repeatedly, putting more volume on their body, but you're not doing it the right way either. So that becomes dangerous too.
Yeah. I, the mindset, I get practicing, but there's something in economics, being a business guy, called the law of diminishing returns. And you can't just do the same thing continuously and get better. There's a point in time where it actually gives a negative output. So if you're just playing softball year round, at some point you're only going to get so good, or something's going to break down. So you have to add running to it, or you have to add yoga to it, or another sport to it, right? Or heaven forbid, take a couple weeks off and just stretch. If you
Yeah,
don't add a second component, something will break down.
yeah,
It's math, it's economics and science. And
yeah,
the other sport in high school is probably the easiest way to go about it. But then what happens to your other coach when you're playing your second sport, though? Come to this open gym. Come to this. Like, I won't let when we do open gyms, I don't want the basketball players there in the wintertime. You just ran a million miles in your program, putting up shots, competing,
yeah.
banging into each other. Go rest your body,
And
because
the thing also,
something will break down.
and there's a fine line between that because the thing I wish would happen is instead of let's say I'm just gonna use myself, like I'm on a softball team and I'm on a basketball team, basketball in the winter, softball in the spring and summer. I wish during, I'm just gonna use an example of I wish during my softball season, right, instead of my basketball coach pulling, be like, come to this, even though it's softball season, support me in my softball season, right? Like I'll be there on Sundays when I'm free, but if we're making a sectional title run, I'm going to be focused on and give my time to where my feet are on the team that I'm in, just like I would for basketball, right? Because that's what I'm committed to at that time. So, how cool would it be if instead my basketball coach and my whole basketball team are like, wow, look at her compete. I can't wait for her to come back to us in the winter because look at all she's doing. Instead of the guilt trip that happens sometimes of, oh, well, if you were really committed to this basketball team, then you would be at my 3 open gyms a week, after you go to softball practice, and you would skip that because you need to go here. So I think that's a big piece too.
Yeah, I know. I think it's super important coaches vocalize that to their players. Like, if your best two players miss the start of your high school season because they're still in the postseason for the other sport, guess
Yeah.
what? You're not worse off. You're actually better off, because they'll catch
Yeah.
up. They'll catch up, trust me. But the
And I,
competitiveness and the adversity that and the leadership they're probably doing in the postseason is far more. The trouble is it's intangible. You can't measure that as much as, well, you didn't get 500 swings in this week. Doesn't
yeah.
matter.
And the thing I will say, there's one caveat to all this that I'm thinking of, right? So let's say I'm in basketball season, and I'm a sophomore and I know I want to play softball in college. Like I know it, right? Let's say in the winter on a Saturday, right, we have 10 to 2 basketball practice, but a college coach reached out to me and said, hey, we'd love for you to come to a visit or we'd love for you to come to our camp. You 100% should let them go. Because to me, that basketball coach or whoever is letting their ego get in the way instead of putting that kid first and letting them, go try to reach their goals. And that's any sport. I'm just using examples of what I played, but like same thing with soccer. If you're in, soccer season and you want to play softball, you should let them go pursue that as long as it doesn't interfere, with like a sectional title game and things like that, because that's up to the kid to decide. But if they're missing something that's, an open gym or a practice in season to go pursue something that might be their life for the next 4 years, I think it's important to take a step back and understand the perspective of like what that could mean for that kid if you allow them to go.
I I 100% agree. One more topic I want your thoughts on. Okay. High school season, that's not your, so it's not softball season. So you're playing a high school sport. What takes priority? The high school sport or travel practices for your softball team?
High school practice for sure. It's
I
tough.
know
I
I
mean,
asked that and it sounds ridiculous, but kids
no,
fight
but
that all the time.
so I think when you decide to play a sport and be on a team, you're committing yourself, your work ethic, and your time to being there and giving it your best effort, right? And honestly, shame on any travel coach that doesn't see that, honestly, because I'm going to give myself to you the entire summer. And it's not like I'm not practicing the sport you want me to play. I'm doing it with a team, right? So, and the situation you're explaining, right, is I'm playing varsity softball in the spring. And my travel coach is like, well, we have practice on Saturday or whatever. That's what you're
No,
saying,
no,
right?
no. I was saying you're playing basketball, but you're missing winter travel softball practice.
Oh, basketball, for sure. For sure.
And
I just
same with
think,
the spring. You should like, yeah, keep going. Then I'll give my
but
final
no,
word.
that's what I was saying earlier about it's a double expectation because when it's summer, they're not going to let you go to basketball open gym, right? So you got to be where your feet are and you choose to commit yourself to something, you're committed to it. And that goes for sports, that goes for life. Like I know for me, when I tell someone I'm going to do something, I'm going to be there, I'm going to be there. That being said, if it's Sunday and we have practice and I'm free, 100% go. But if it's at the same time as your basketball practice, you made a commitment to your team, your coach, to be there and to give your best effort. So why are you going to something optional instead of something mandatory in the season that you're in? And it's hard when you're a young kid because you have an authority figure or an adult telling you that that's the way it should
Right.
be. But I really don't agree with that at all.
You had a travel coach once that got mad because you missed practice for a regents review class. And
Yeah.
as a coach, I still went to the practice. Like, have some. It's not about the coach, and shame on any coach that does that. To be honest with you, and
And what I think it does is those type of actions, right? Because you can have coaches say, "I'm going to help you get recruited, and I want you to be the best version of yourself you can be." Okay, going to a regions and studying is going to help my GPA. It's going to help me get recruited. Playing other sports is going to allow me to be more competitive, compete, and help me get recruited. So it's almost like, are your words really aligning with the goals that you say you have for me? Because right now, what you're doing and what you're saying isn't in line with that.
so I'm holding us accountable now. Next time we don't have a guest, I want to do an episode just on the concept of practice in general. Okay.
Okay.
Because
Mhm.
I don't think you have to be with 12 other people necessarily to call it a practice. You
Yeah,
can
we'll
go with,
talk about that.
yeah, yeah.
That's
That's a whole nother thing. And my point is good athletes or committed athletes, if they're missing your off-season workout, they're still putting in the reps somewhere at some
mhm,
time. And it doesn't have
mhm,
to be with you. And that's a
mhm,
whole nother topic. But so I put X's, what we talked about, being more athletic, different roles, less injury prone, more relationships, different coaches, adversity, different exercises for the mind and body, and parental burnout. We indirectly covered or directly covered all those in almost 25 minutes. So we did pretty good.
yeah, yeah.
So what are your plans today after the podcast? I want to hear.
Well, happy Fourth, everybody, first of all, because that's when we're recording this. I am going to the Cubs game today with some of my friends. So out here in Chicago, Cubs versus Phillies game. It's supposed to be a beautiful day. So looking forward to it.
Wow, Cubs, 4th of July, Bryce
Yeah,
Harper. I mean, that
yeah,
sounds like a lot of fun. So
I
don't get
know.
sunburned.
Yeah, probably. How about you? What are you up to?
Uh, just working on the new place and a little picnic with the moms. So a little more
Nice.
low key than you.
Yeah.
All right, hey, we'll talk soon.
All right. Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, bye.